Russian military aircraft, literally, hits a cliff in the Russian-occupied peninsula of Crimea. Ukrainian continuous attacks on Baltic seaports of Ust Luga and Primorsk cost Russia over $1 billion. Trump's ambiguous strategy of making friends out of enemies and vice versa, how is it working? And who's the beneficiary? A Russian An-26 military aircraft has crashed in temporarily occupied Crimea, according to local authorities. Everyone on board was killed, a total of 29 people, including 3 crew members. The Russian Ministry of Defense reported that contact with the An-26 military transport aircraft was lost on Tuesday evening while it was conducting a scheduled flight over temporarily occupied Crimea. According to Russian media reports, the An-26 struck a mountainside. It is noted that there were no signs of external impact. A technical malfunction is cited as the preliminary cause of the crash. An explosion occurred at a chemical plant in Tatarstan, followed by a massive fire. The incident resulted in 2 fatalities and left 72 others injured. Rosaviatsia, the Russian Federal Air Transport Agency, announced a temporary closure of the local airport to ensure flight safety. Such restrictions are typically implemented due to the threat of drone attacks. However, local authorities stated that the explosion was caused by an equipment malfunction. We don't know what exactly has happened, but while Putin spends all money on war, but not on the Russian economy, such accidents will occur more and more often. Repeated attacks on the oil export terminals at Primorsk and Ust Luga set storage tanks ablaze and halted loading activities for much of last week, cutting flows through the ports to about 1/3 of the previous level. This has reduced Moscow's oil income by more than $1 billion. Ukraine shows no sign of easing up and is preparing new strikes. More in the next story for you.
Drones have struck Russia's Ust Luga oil export port for the 5th time in the past 10 days, Reuters reports. On the morning of March 31st, the governor of Russia's Leningrad region, Alexander Drozdenko, reported damage at the port. Ust Luga is often described as Russia's gateway to the Baltic. It is the country's largest port for exporting significant volumes of crude oil and petroleum products, including shipments handled by vessels from Russia's Shadow Fleet. Strikes on Ust Luga mean direct losses in hard currency export revenues for Russia.
These unidentified good drones that reached the Leningrad region so quickly have effectively destroyed all hopes of making quick money, including through what Trump had announced as a reduction or removal of certain restrictions he had allegedly imposed on supplies of Russian raw materials to India. So now, any increase in oil and gas revenues will be significantly smaller.
As a result of Ukrainian strikes on the aggressor state's infrastructure and logistics facilities, the Kremlin has already lost up to 45% of its oil exports and nearly 40% of its monthly missile production, according to estimates by Ukraine's Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council.
Russia is waging an ideological war against Ukraine. Putin's regime is pursuing purely imperial ideological goals. Accordingly, simplistic scenarios that some describe as mutual concessions, supposedly capable of bringing peace in a single moment, are part of the fog of war and lies. Russia's clear objective today is to continue its aggression, and that objective will change only when it begins to run out of resources. Andriy Kovalenko, head of the Center for Countering Disinformation under Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council on Telegram.
Ukraine's long-range sanctions are directly hitting the Kremlin's key sources of income: a record budget deficit, galloping inflation, and systemic problems across virtually every sector of the economy. This is now a reality that can no longer be ignored. Moscow saw the escalation in the Middle East as an opportunity. The president of Ukraine is convinced that, unlike the Russian dictator, leaders in the region have no interest in a prolonged confrontation.
As of today, I am convinced that Russia wants a long war. It benefits from it. The United States is focused on the Middle East, which means reduced military support for Ukraine. In addition, sanctions have been eased, partially, but still eased, and Russia is beginning to grow economically. I see only benefits for Moscow because it does not care about human lives, especially when those are not Russian lives. Volodymyr Zelenskyy, president of Ukraine, in an interview with Axios.
Ukraine's growing operational and strategic ability to inflict ever greater damage on Russia is causing serious alarm even within Russia's own ultranationalist community. Analysts at the Institute for the Study of War note failures in air defense. In other words, Moscow's inability to protect its key facilities are now being compounded by setbacks on the battlefield.
A prominent Russian ultranationalist military blogger complained that Russian forces will not be able to reverse the unfavorable situation on the battlefield in the coming months, and that Ukraine's fairly successful counterattacks have undermined Russia's ability to conduct offensive operations in 2026, from an ISW report.
Europe must step up pressure on the aggressor state, EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said.
We see again and again that Ukraine is demonstrating its desire for peace, while Russia is intensifying its attacks. And we understand that pressure must be placed on the aggressor, not on the victim. There will be no lasting peace unless Russia is put under pressure. To end this war, Moscow must be confronted, not encouraged. Restrictions must not be eased, they must be tightened. The 20th sanctions package is ready for approval, and we will tighten the noose even further, especially around Russia's shadow fleet.
But Brussels and Washington would be far stronger if they acted in coordination and increased pressure on Russia together, Kaja Kallas noted, reported by Karina Lalayan, UATV News.
Russians demand Ukraine withdraw from Donbas within 2 months. In that case, the war would supposedly end. Spoiler, no. President Zelenskyy has said he is surprised that anyone could believe the war would end if Ukraine withdrew from Donbas.
Russians claim they will capture Donbass within 2 months, and Ukraine therefore has 2 months to withdraw from the region. In that case, the war would supposedly end. But if Ukraine does not withdraw within 2 months, Russia will capture Donbass, and then there will be other conditions. The logical question is, if their goal is only Donbass, this is my question to our American colleagues, then if they can capture Donbass, why do they say they will go further, and that there will be other conditions afterwards? So the issue is clearly not Donbass, as I see it.
And another logical question. If Russia couldn't seize Donbas since the invasion of Ukraine in 2014, how are they going to do it now, after 12 years? Zelenskyy reported that Russian losses in 2026 have already amounted to 89,000 personnel killed or severely wounded. He added that Russia planned to mobilize 409,000 people in 2026, of which only 20% were actually mobilized, around 80,000. Donald Trump has said that countries facing problems with fuel supplies through the Strait of Hormuz, including the UK, should act on their own. Trump suggested either buying fuel from the US or going to the strait and just taking it, adding that allies should learn to fight for themselves.
All of those countries that can't get jet fuel because of the Strait of Hormuz, like the United Kingdom, which refused to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion for you. Number 1, buy from the US, we have plenty. And number 2, build up some delayed courage, go to the strait, and just take it. You'll have to start learning how to fight for yourself. The USA won't be there to help you anymore, just like you weren't there for us. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Go get your own oil. Donald Trump, President of the United States, on Truth Social.
Here it is in easy terms. Trump is the hard part. They are birds of a feather. King Trump and his Russian counterpart, Russian Tsar Vladimir Putin. Both are narcissists, unable to accept any reality that doesn't reinforce their power. Vladimir Putin is obsessed with rebuilding the Soviet Empire, while Donald Trump built his narrative on making America great again, despite the US never losing that status. Putin, however delusional, operates with a plan. Trump does not. He tends to amplify problems while claiming to solve them. Even actions against Iranian fundamentalism were poorly planned, badly timed, and mismanaged, worsening the situation. In the aftermath, Trump offers no clear strategy, leaving behind instability, escalating conflicts, and a vacuum that benefits geopolitical rivals.
Honestly, I don't think about it. My only job was to make sure they didn't have nuclear weapons. They won't have them. Once we leave, the strait will automatically open. Donald Trump, President of the United States, in an interview with the New York Post.
That said, there is a thing we all must admit. Donald Trump knows how to make friends out of enemies and enemies out of friends like no other.
Our Patriot batteries and their weapons are designed to protect Polish airspace and NATO's eastern flank. Nothing changes in this regard, and we have no plans to redeploy them anywhere. Our allies know and understand how important our tasks are. Poland's security is an absolute priority. Władysław Kozyniak-Kamysz, Minister of Defense of Poland, on X.
Saudi Arabia has reviewed Donald Trump's proposals and appears to be stepping back from a major defense deal with Washington tied to normalization with Israel, seeking to avoid future political risks. Ukraine, meanwhile, is moving pragmatically, focusing on its own leverage, primarily its defense forces, and expanding partnerships, including with the Middle East, if U.S. support falters. Kyiv is also signaling readiness to contribute its expertise to securing critical routes like the Strait of Hormuz, if needed. Despite having no navy, Ukraine has effectively challenged Russia in the Black Sea and is now signaling it could apply similar tactics against Iran in the Persian Gulf. During a recent Middle East visit, Volodymyr Zelenskyy emphasized that Kyiv is not just exporting weapons, but offering combat-tested defense expertise. This includes potential contributions to securing the Strait of Hormuz, a critical route for roughly 20% of global oil and LNG flows, currently threatened by Iranian actions in response to U.S. and Israeli strikes. While more than 20 nations have backed the U.S.-led efforts to reopen the route, many remain reluctant to be drawn into a direct conflict with Iran, one widely seen as initiated but not fully managed by Donald Trump. Fortunately, Ukraine says there's another way, and Kyiv knows it. It's touting how it dealt with Russia in the Black Sea, where in 2023, Russia blocked Ukraine's grain exports, creating a global food crisis. However, Ukraine managed to sink much of Russia's Black Sea fleet and chase the remnants far from its waters. Oh no, don't believe us. Just watch. That's your news digest for today. If you found this breakdown useful, hit like, share your take in the comments, and subscribe to stay ahead of the story. The next update is already in motion. Stay sharp, and see you tomorrow.